On this episode of Watch Stuff with Us, another Mrballen video.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Watch Stuff with Us. I am JD.
I am Katie.
And we are doing another Mrballen video. This is like 13th or 14th Mrballen video.
I know, we just keep saying another.
Yep.
Another.
I think we should just like eventually do all of them. Because they seem to get like a bunch of comments and people kind of like watching us react to them, I guess. So maybe we should keep doing it.
That could work.
Also, I'm going to give you guys some homework. Something you can do right now. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment below, hit that notification bell so that you can be notified each and every time we go live in 2025 and in the future, because we can't go live in the past because it already happened. That'd be kind of weird. But
that's deep, bruh.
Yeah. Speaking of deep, more Mrballen.
One night in 1870, two best friends were out in the wilds of the Canadian wilderness when they discovered this gigantic gold mine. But within just a few hours of this seemingly incredible discovery, something horrible happened to these two men that kickstarted a chain of tragic events that today we still do not fully understand. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered story format, you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. On a spring morning in 1870, a gold prospector named Frank Lemon rode his horse along the shore of the North Saskatchewan River, which is a river that runs through Alberta and Saskatchewan in Canada. Frank was at the back of a line of about a dozen men who had all been hired by a rich investor named Lafayette French. He had commissioned them to search.
He shaved, that's what it is. Keep trying to figure out what's different with his face.
I was gonna say, you think he's hot now?
Still? Mining operation and pull out all the gold he could.
I don't know, but he lost like all this that was just there.
Yeah.
So that's
when
better.
Frank had signed up for this job,
anyway,
he had thought it was a great
looks younger.
He does.
In fact, he thought it was such a big opportunity that he had
He's
convinced
baby now.
his friend, whose nickname was Blackjack, to come along as well.
Blackjack.
Now, after weeks of searching the wilderness for these mines and not finding any, all Frank really wanted to do now was just go home. And so as this group of men continued their ride along the shore, Frank sort of zoned out and just kind of stared off into the forest all around him. And then at some point, as he was doing this, as he was looking off to his right, he noticed amongst the thick trees, there was this little trail, this dirt trail that kind of wound off into the distance. And for some reason, Frank was just immediately drawn to it. And so he pulled on his horse's reins and came to a stop and just stared at this strange trail. Frank thought about how for all this time they've been out here searching for gold, they'd basically only looked in this river and found nothing. And so he thought to himself, maybe the gold is not in the river, but it's maybe out there in the woods. And maybe this trail that he was looking at might lead them to gold. And so Frank turned back around to tell the rest of the group about his big idea, to try to go down this trail here. But
error number one, mysterious trail, and you decide to go walk it. You could have just stuck with what you normally do and you find gold in the river, but instead you take the mysterious trail.
Just take the gold and go, man.
But when he looked, he saw all the men in the group, except for his best friend Blackjack, had continued on without him. They basically hadn't even stopped when Frank had stopped. However, Frank really didn't care that the group had left him, because he was totally over this trip and frankly didn't want to be with this group anyways. And so he just looked over at Blackjack and just kind of gestured towards this trail as if to say, "You want to go this way?" And Blackjack, who was also totally over this trip, just smiled and nodded like, "Yeah, let's go." And so the two men turned their horses and began heading down this thin dirt trail off into the woods. For several hours, Frank and Blackjack continued on this trail deeper and deeper.
Not real footage of the forest.
I know, they keep saying not real footage of the trail.
Dirt trail on the ground. They had no idea where this trail was going, but there was just something so powerful about this trail. It was like calling them to go. But
shot every time they say trail.
Frank kept getting this bad feeling. Like he kept hearing what sounded like voices and footsteps right behind them on the trail. But every time he turned, all he saw was Blackjack. There was nobody around them at all.
Okay, mistake number two. When you get these heebie-jeebies about stuff, follow them. Listen to it. because obviously you're starting to feel some stuff. You're already going down a creepy path, you know. So
But they're real men.
yeah, yeah,
Nothing scares them.
prospectors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
prospectors.
What they probably had their like what are those things called? Like no
Satchel.
pitchfork, no, the little thing pickaxe. Yep, probably had the pickaxe on their shoulder and was just walking down this road. Yep, had a satchel and a bottle of whiskey in the satchel.
Plot twist: the horses were talking.
Oh, maybe it was.
They over there whispering.
Yeah.
These guys are ridiculous.
Yeah, here it comes.
I don't want to go down this trail.
Let's get them off. I'm out of here.
They were deep in the forest. And after a while, Frank kept hearing these noises, and he asked Blackjack, like, hey, are you hearing that stuff too? And Blackjack said, yeah, I am. But he too would turn around and see nothing. They were all alone. And so eventually, the men convinced themselves that, what those sounds must be is the sound of their party, who's discovered they have, left the group, and maybe they're out there looking for them. But Frank and Blackjack really had no intention of rejoining the group. They kind of didn't like the group. And so they said, you know what? Let's just keep on going. Eventually.
Okay, next error and mistake that they made. You're with a group, but you decide to go do your own thing. Never goes well. Never goes well. And then on top of that, you don't tell the other people that you're going to do your own thing. You just up and do it. We've learned from watching several Mrballen videos before that this is something that happens in a lot of them. People decide to go off the beaten path and just do something random, and then they end up randomly
gobbled up,
croaked.
Yep.
The path these
safety
two friends
first
were on led them to a stream. And so they stopped, they got up
not
horses,
real footage of the forest.
Down, they scooped their canteens into the water to get a drink. And as Frank did that,
the water does
he
look
looked
nice
into the crystal clear water, and he saw nuggets of gold just sitting there.
Oh, melted chocolate chip cookies.
Frank couldn't believe it. I mean, he's out here looking for gold, but he was not expecting to find it right here in the middle of nowhere, despite, his instinct that maybe the gold was out here. And so he just froze, and he's staring at this. He can't believe it. He grabs Blackjack, who hadn't seen it yet, and pulls him over.
Blackjack, get over here, man.
And the two men, they're like, oh my goodness.
Would you look at this? We did it.
Look, before we celebrate, let's see what we're dealing with here.
Blackjack, we did it.
Here and try to find the source of this gold. And so the two men, they got up. They're super excited.
Don't try to look for the source of it. Just start taking it. Hurry up.
Exactly. Now you're getting
Take
greedy.
what you see already and get out of there.
What are we at? Mistake number 4, right? Yeah, something like that.
Too many.
Greedy. Greed kills.
That party's gonna come back and kill him for the gold.
That's your prediction?
The end.
No,
I don't know.
Or the ghost star. Ghost in the forest.
Oh, those little whispering little spirits.
Yep.
They start walking along the side of the stream, looking in the water, and as they're moving upstream, they're seeing all this gold in the water. It's getting more and more, and eventually they reach this rock ledge. The water was pouring over down into the stream, and literally in the ledge are these massive veins of
Not
gold.
a real photo
They
of rock
had found
ledge.
a gigantic gold mine that clearly nobody else had tapped before. I mean, this could be worth not just millions of dollars, but billions of dollars. And so
just in case you didn't know, that's 811 million in euros.
Oh.
It's 1 billion American dollars. Also, mistake number 5, thinking that you're going to just discover all this gold on this path that was like clearly set out there. If there's a path, obviously somebody made the path. And you're probably not the first to discover this stuff, but hey, maybe you just think you're lucky. I'm willing to let that one slide because maybe they just figured that they were the luckiest people on earth.
There might be somebody just camping in the bushes for a long time waiting for somebody with an axe to come and dislodge it because they don't have an axe.
A troll.
Exactly.
A troll.
He didn't have a bridge. Is he under a bridge?
He's under the like water thing. He's just hanging out there. He got all the gold, and he's like, he's my gold.
Under the rock ledge?
Yep.
It wasn't that rock ledge.
No, not
a real
one.
picture
And
of
the
it.
waterfall thing. Yep.
Yeah.
He's the waterfall, and he's a waterfall troll. Those are things. Look it up. Google it.
At this point, the two friends began to celebrate. They were ecstatic. I mean, this is unbelievable. They're jumping around, they're hugging each other, and then at some point they just kind of stopped and went silent because they realized they now had a big dilemma. So the whole reason Frank and Blackjack were out here in the Canadian wilderness was to look for gold, but they were looking for gold on behalf of the rich investor, Lafayette French, which meant they were contractually obligated to tell French if they found gold. And so here they are, they found this massive gold mine, and that's what they're supposed to do, again, based on their contract. But if they did that, French would get rich beyond his wildest dreams from this mine, and yeah, he'd cut them a check, a piece of the profits, but it would be like nothing compared to what French would get from this gold mine. Or, and this is where the dilemma comes in, Frank and Blackjack could hide the facts that they had found this mine, and then they alone could come out here anytime they wanted, take the gold, and become rich themselves. Now, granted, they would have to be kind of subtle about it, so they started showing up with barrelfuls of gold. Lafayette French is going to find out about it, and they're going to be in trouble.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Give him some, and then you take some too.
Right.
And then you just leave town.
But obviously, there was a lot of risk involved in that second choice. And so Frank and Blackjack decided that, you know what, this is way too big of a decision for us to make just on the fly right now. So let's just stay here in the area. Let's camp out for the night and just sleep on this and come to a decision tomorrow. So the two men left the stream.
Because nobody's going to come looking for them.
Poor decision again. Let's creepy wooded area with all the riches. Let's go take a nap and go to sleep, and then we'll figure this out in the morning.
Yep, and the ones that you were supposed to be with, they might be noticing you're missing and come back and look for you.
Maybe.
And yeah,
Maybe. We'll see.
Headed over to this clearing that was right nearby and decided that's where they would pitch their camp for the night. Blackjack left to go gather firewood, and Frank began to pitch their tent. And as Frank did that, they began setting up their tent. He began hearing whispers, kind of like the voices he was hearing as they were walking in on that trail, and they kept thinking it was maybe the group that was looking for them. He began hearing those voices again. It was kind of all around him in the trees. But every time he looked, there was no one there. Now, Frank convinced himself that maybe these whispers were actually Blackjack, because he had gone off to get firewood. Maybe it was him. But at one point, when Frank heard these whispers, he looked in the direction of the whispers. There was no one there. And he realized Blackjack was at the same time on the opposite side of the clearing. It could not have been him. And so Frank couldn't help but feel really unsettled. It was like there was somebody or something here watching them or listening to them, but he just couldn't tell who or what it was. But Frank just told himself to shake it off, don't worry about that. Instead, just focus on getting the camp set up. We recently launched our newest podcast at Mrballen Studios called...
Oh, yeah, thanks, man. They recently launched their podcast, but we're going to go ahead and skip past that.
I'm sure it's awesome.
Yeah, go check it out after you subscribe to our channel.
Frank and Blackjack were sitting
he must have cut his hair, too.
Campfire eating rations, talking about what they were going to do with the gold. At some point...
You still talking about his looks and his appearance.
Only because they just showed that old one with his hair all shaggy and it is all the scruff there. So then I was like, oh, that's another thing. What else am I supposed to look at? All I got is not real pictures of forests and Mrballen.
Relax.
I'm fine.
Relax.
Frank said what he was really thinking about this whole situation. He told Blackjack, look, I think we'd be so stupid to tell Lafayette French.
So stupid.
Why should we take a small payday one time?
His name is Lafayette. He don't need to know.
He already sounds like he's wealthy.
But when Frank looked over at Blackjack,
Lafayette.
I've never seen a broke Lafayette.
Yeah, Lafayette and Blackjack and what's the guy's name? Frank?
Frank. He's a broke.
He kind of turned to Frank and was like, look, it's morally wrong to lie here. I would rather be poor.
Blackjack's famous because he's got the gum.
Morally bankrupt. And so what had started as a civil discussion from this point on really escalated and just became a full-blown yelling fight, with both men absolutely refusing to budge on their stance about what to do with this gold. And eventually, when the two men were standing up and just screaming in each other's faces, Blackjack finally just threw his hands up and said, you know what, enough. And he turned around and stormed over to the tent and disappeared inside. For a minute, Frank just stood there stewing.
It's not a real photo of Frank, though.
Completely furious that Blackjack didn't see it the way he saw it. But eventually, Frank kind of calmed down and thought, you know what? I need to go to bed too. Obviously, we are not near a decision.
Okay, so is this the same night or is this another night? I'm hoping this is still that first night.
I think it's still the first night.
Okay, because
they were just getting ready for bed.
I mean, like, what hold on, let me go brush my teeth real quick. Let me go shower up. Let me go get my slippers. all while we're trying to figure this out. Like, to me, this type of discussion is not something that should last like multiple hours. It should just be like, okay, what are we gonna do about this? Are we gonna tell them or no?
You probably shouldn't be wandering away from each other so much.
No, and you also shouldn't be thinking this long about this situation.
Nope.
Like, make your choice and then go ahead and roll with it. But they've been out here for hours now. And they're about to sleep overnight. Nah, it's just
bad choices.
Yep.
They're not being
We need
responsible.
to sleep on this. And so, even though Frank was still upset,
Not
he walked over to the tent too, didn't say a word to Blackjack. He just climbed inside, got into his sleeping bag, and tried to go to sleep. But after laying there for a while, when Frank had not fallen asleep, and his friend Blackjack had, he was snoring and passed out, Frank just could not help feeling enraged again at his friend. Like, how can you not see this opportunity here? Why in the world would you tell Lafayette French? That's so stupid.
Oh, he's gonna
And
kill
so
his friend
Frank
to get
just
more
laid
gold.
there restlessly tossing and turning, listening to the sound
Yep,
of
I
Blackjack
think you gotta figure it
snoring,
out.
getting so mad at him. And as he did, Frank went from, I need to convince Blackjack in the morning that we need to keep the gold for ourselves.
I need to get rid of Blackjack.
to, I need to stop Blackjack from telling anyone. He is an obstacle. He's not a friend. He's a problem. And as he thought about this, these dark thought loops were going through his head.
Oh,
just became
Frank.
consumed with rage. It was like he couldn't control what he was doing. And in that moment, Frank found himself getting up, walking out of the tent, and grabbing an axe. And before he could even think about it, he had walked back into the tent, raised the axe, and driven it into Blackjack's skull, killing him instantly. A few minutes later, Frank was outside, sitting by the campfire, looking.
Holy heck.
Where did they get this painting from?
That's a picture. That is a real picture of his murder, though.
Yeah.
Those woods weren't real, but
What are these back here?
those are monkeys.
Yeah, why are there monkeys in the woods? Why are there monkeys there? And Blackjack looks real calm and peaceful before he's about to get his head like knocked in.
I thought he was in a tent.
There are some discrepancies here. Are these headphones?
Those are car keys?
Is that a cell phone?
That looks like a tin can, I think. Well, what's that thing? I don't know.
This looks like the end of a headphone.
Yeah, Apple AirPods.
That's why he didn't wake up when he came with the axe and heard him walking over.
Those poor
'cause he was
horses,
listening to
like,
stuff.
they're too good to be with these people. They should have left.
Yep. Also, it doesn't look like Frank has toes.
Or no shoes?
Yeah. Okay.
Where's the tent?
Why are the monkeys?
Why you got beer? That's a beer bottle. What year is this?
I don't remember.
I didn't think they had beer bottles then. You get like mugs of beer or canteens or something, but yeah. Look, Coors Light bottle over there.
You got an IPA.
And that fire looks like it's not surrounded by rocks. Those look like trash bags, so I don't know what's happening.
It's a nice little fire. It's different. This is a different setup.
I'm really confused about the monkeys. I hope they come into play.
Yep.
They're the ones that have been whispering the whole time.
Yes, the whispering monkeys.
These guys are idiots.
Go kill Blackjack. Get him. He's sleeping right now. Go get your axe. You gotta get a gold.
Run, horses, run.
Looking at his bloody hands, wondering what just happened.
Oh, come on,
How
man.
had he just done what he did? That was his best friend. What had come over him? It was like Frank was a different person. He couldn't understand.
He's gonna blame the
But
voices.
As Frank was sitting there grappling with what he had just done, a twig suddenly snapped over in the direction.
And the
monkeys.
Instantly, Frank looked over. Like, who's over there? What's going on?
Ooh, ooh,
And as he looked in the direction of the tent, he began to hear this low, guttural moaning.
It's not us. We're not monkeys. We're not monkeys.
It is not me.
It was not us. Don't blame us.
I'm not a monkey.
Thoughts one. Don't try to put it on us, the monkeys. This was your fault. What's wrong with you? Don't blame us. We're just monkeys.
You killed him yourself.
almost sounded like a dying animal.
Josh
And he thought for a second, like, wait a minute, is Blackjack not actually dead? Is that him making that noise? But at the same time, Frank's thinking, that's not possible. I practically split Blackjack's head in half with that axe. He can't
That's
be making
visual.
that sound. But before Frank could even begin to process what he was hearing, this sound, this moaning sound, got louder and it got closer to Frank, like it was moving in his direction, but there's nobody here. And so Frank is horrified, and then right as the sound is practically on top of him, he began hearing those whispers, those voices he had been hearing in the woods on the way out here. Except this time the voices were clear. They were talking to Frank, and they were saying, you're going to be tortured for what you did to Blackjack. And then just as soon as
they
these
knew his
voices
name.
began, suddenly they stopped. The moaning stopped, and the entire forest just went deadly silent. And Frank is just stuck there staring in the tent, wondering what's happening. And then the silence.
There wasn't a real photo of the forest, just FYI.
No, that wasn't the
Was
stars
broken
either.
by this unbelievably loud, high-pitched, blood-curdling human scream coming from the tent. And it was at that point that Frank just got up and sprinted to his horse and began riding away from the gold, his friend's body, everything. He didn't care. He needed to get out of there as soon as possible. But the second he began blindly galloping through the forest away from this area, he began hearing whispers and heavy footsteps right behind him as if they were following him out of the forest. But Frank was so scared, he didn't even dare turn around to look. He just rode as fast as he possibly could. Hours later, Frank suddenly emerged from the dark forest, and just by absolute happenstance, he arrived right in the town that he and the other gold prospectors had passed through on their way out into the woods.
Just so happened.
Frank left the tree line and actually entered into this town, the whispering and the footsteps, which had basically chased him all the way to this point, they stopped. Suddenly, Frank was all alone. Now, by this point, Frank had convinced himself that everything he had heard in the woods, the voice telling him he was going to be tortured for what he'd done, the heavy footsteps, the whispering, the screaming, the moaning,
Means you probably should see your primary care provider.
Was actually the ghost of Blackjack. That after he had killed his friend's spirit had immediately risen and sought revenge.
Yeah,
Frank.
that'd be my
That's what
first
was
guess.
happening. And this horrified Frank so much that he didn't care at all about the gold anymore. He just wanted to get out of the spiritual danger he thought he was in. And so as he rode into this village, all he looked for was a church. And when he found the church, he went to the front steps and he sat there waiting for the priest. At dawn, the priest finally arrived at the church and found Frank.
Oh, that's a real photo of the priest. Jean Le Héros.
Le Heroux. Heroux.
Hurrah.
Hurrah! John, hurrah!
This credit goes to the mystery of the Lost Lemon Mine.
Lost Lemon Mine, yep. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I thought he was pretty spiffy, so I had to say something about him.
Dapper. This is my jacket, he says. It's new.
His pocket square,
You like my jacket?
in his bowler cap. I think that's what those are called.
Got it on sale.
Mm-hmm.
$2.99 at Goodwill.
At the local Kmart.
That was probably around back then.
Horrible. And Frank instantly stood up, rushed over to the priest, and began begging him to save him from Blackjack's ghost. Now, at first, as the priest listened to Frank tell his story about this ghost, he just thought that Frank was crazy. But once he got Frank to slow down and sort of go over the details step by step, the priest realized that perhaps there was some truth to this story. It sounded like it was probably true that Frank really did find a gold mine with his friend named Blackjack, and at some point, the discovery of this gold mine prompted Frank to murder Blackjack. But despite the fact that this man, Frank, had just openly confessed to a murder, the priest could only focus on the gold. The gold that apparently Frank had found out in the forest. It was like this
Priests don't make much.
Feeling had come over the priest, this darkness that just made him suddenly so greedy. He had never felt this way.
I'm not
before in
loving
his
this story, to
life.
be honest.
I don't know. Everybody is getting
Razor focused on
corrupted.
Finding a way to claim that wealth that was just
Corrupted
out
by
there
the
right
gold.
now. And so against all his
Sounds more
better
like
judgment,
control and jealousy
the priest
than
turns to Frank and says, what?
spirits.
We'll help you. But for right now, you need to get out of town. Get out of here. Don't come back. We'll go out, we'll find Blackjack, we'll give him a proper burial, and that will protect you from his ghost. And so Frank was so thankful to the priest, and he took off. not realizing that the priest did not care at all about Frank at this point. All the priest cared about was getting Frank out of the picture.
Gold.
So that gold mine out in the woods
Getting me
could be his.
gold.
The next day, the priest asked his friend, an outdoorsman named John McDougal, to head off into the wilderness to try to find.
Okay, which one of
Frank
them's
and
gonna
Blackjack's
die? Right.
campsite. So that's what John did, and after a few hours of looking, he found the campsite. And sure enough, he found Blackjack's dead body still inside of the tent with the axe lodged.
See,
in
now
his
they're
head.
in a tent.
Right away,
Not a real
John,
photo of the tent,
her
though.
loyal friend, the priest, began doing what the priest told him to do, which was to bury Blackjack to cover up the murder, because the priest and John were planning to claim this gold mine for themselves, and they couldn't have this murder getting out to the public, because then officials would come out and investigate the scene, and then they would find the gold mine.
And be
Because
all over Facebook and local news.
to Blackjack. As he did,
Turning that
he began
AM
hearing
radio.
whispers all around him in the trees. Remember, he's all alone out there. So he began looking around, trying to figure out who's out here. Did somebody follow him? There was no one. John did his best to keep trying to dig.
Where
as
are these
best as he could,
monkeys?
But these whispers, these awful voices, they just kept getting louder and louder and more pronounced.
Why are there monkeys in the forest? Why are there monkeys in the forest?
Spooked. I mean, John was this avid outdoorsman who routinely spent time by himself out in the wild. But here he was.
Monkeys
feeling
are like,
very
help us, we're lost.
unsettled. But despite his fear,
I don't care about gold.
We're not even from this continent.
As fast as he could, grabbed Blackjack's
Downy
body,
fruit.
threw him inside. He covered him up, and he put a couple of big stones on top.
It's
of
not
the
a real
grave
photo
site
of Blackjack's
to make
grave.
No, not
a
at all.
makeshift tombstone. And then afterwards, again, despite feeling totally unsettled out here, John did the next part of the plan, which was to go look for gold, go to the stream, find the gold these guys were talking about. But as John is down by the water looking for gold, he began
Real
hearing
photo of
more
the
and
stream.
more of those voices all
Oh,
around
of a
him.
stream
He
near
kept
the area.
spinning around, but nobody was there. And then finally, this awful high-pitched laughter cut through the trees. He whipped around. There was nobody
It's the
there, but it was
monkeys.
so terrifying
It's the
that John
monkeys.
just abandoned the search for gold and just hopped back on his horse and fled out of there. But within a couple of days, John and the priest had convinced themselves that those weird noises and that laughter that John had heard out there was just some bird, that it was all in John's head. He was spooked for no reason, when in reality, it was just that incredible pull of that gold being out there waiting to be claimed. It was like John and the priest, they couldn't not go looking for it. And so John decided to go back out into the woods. Except this time, he did not go alone. He brought a group of men with him. And so
Brought the
this group,
monkeys.
led by John, retraced Frank and Blackjack's steps down that skinny trail all the way to their campsite. And when they got there, John just froze. Could not believe what he was
The
seeing.
gold was
The
gone.
rocks that were sitting on the grave where John had just buried Blackjack were gone. These
Oh.
huge rocks just
Hmm.
missing. And also, the tent, the bloodied tent where Blackjack
Not
had
a
been
real photo.
murdered,
That's
had
scary.
also been cleared. There was no trace of it anywhere. It was like the campsite had never existed. And this made no sense to John because he knows this is a totally isolated part of the wilderness. Like, nobody comes through here. Who in their right mind would just happen to pass by and randomly grab all these rocks and a tent covered in blood and take
Goes
it
to
out of here?
Blackjack's
It made
like,
no
I gotta
sense.
clean
Like,
up
who could've done
myself.
that? Now, until this
Come on,
point,
me.
John really had convinced himself that everything he
get
was
out of
Put
thinking
this
was
tent
a
away.
dog,
This is bad for
or even a
nature.
pet,
Just leave it
just
out
a
here.
bird, or just normal
Deer could
forest
get stuck.
sounds. And he also, like the priest, had convinced himself that Frank's original story about Blackjack's ghost chasing him out of the forest was just the ramblings of a crazy, guilty man. A murderer's guilty conscience had created that story. But now, as John was surveying the scene in front of him,
Not
he
anymore.
couldn't help but think, maybe this place is haunted. And so once again, John just turned and fled. He and the men, they got out of there as fast as they could. And when John
There's a lot of people running out of this forest, man. Like, if you run out at a certain point, you got to be like, I probably shouldn't go back. But this is like John's third time. Blackjack didn't make it out his one time. But what's Frank? He left out there twice. Like,
All this time, though, all these people going in and out, and nobody's just taking like one little handful of gold. Like you haven't even just like
Right.
taken a little.
true.
What do they
Nobody's
call it?
gotten
A little-
anything yet.
What do they call it? A little.
A little pouch,
No, like a
a little nugget.
nugget of gold.
Yeah.
Gold nugget.
Yep.
Yeah, just
And-
nobody's just like I'm just gonna at least take one before I leave
Yeah.
here forever.
Or that one that looked like poop in the beginning.
Right,
Nobody
that-
took it.
Nope.
It's still there.
Chocolate
to
chip
this
cookie
day.
poop.
got back to town, instead of going to the priest, he just went right to the bar and just started drinking. Until he died of alcohol poisoning just a couple of days later.
Jesus.
Death, started a chain of unexplained catastrophes. All
Dang.
That's dramatic,
Hold on.
man.
It's one thing to like, oh,
You're not even being
I
haunted
had a
or
rough
anything.
day. I had a rough day. So
Yep.
I'm going to go have a drinker 40, I
Yeah.
guess. And like, yeah, 2 days later, you gone. Like, what?
He just kept drinking. He never left the bar. He just continued. He lived there for 2 days, and then
He lived there.
he lived there forever.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Now his ghost is running around the bar.
He wasn't even being haunted.
No.
He just noticed somebody had cleaned up the area and was like, I'm gonna go now.
Yep. And I'm thirsty.
Wait, did he hear sounds?
I think he did.
The laughing or something?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Mm.
Still grab the
First,
gold.
The priest,
and then
after
go.
discovering what happened to John, didn't really spend any time grieving the loss of his friend. Instead, the priest
priest
just
is a
saddled
real
up,
winner.
headed out into the woods to find the gold
I
himself.
don't feel like he's even
However, he
ordained.
found
He's
that
just
the gold
Joe
led out
Schmo.
to the
Swearing and
campsite.
stuff.
Gold
Yep.
had been destroyed in a forest fire. Then Lafayette French, the rich investor who had bankrolled the original expedition, he heard about the mine and decided he would go find it. However, the guide that he hired to take him there literally died on the way into the forest. By this point, French had heard all the stories about how, Blackjack's ghost was out in this forest, haunting the area, preventing people from finding the gold. But French ignored all those stories. Just like with Frank and the priest and John, it was like that gold had an unbreakable hold on him. And so for 30 years, French kept going out into that forest, searching for that gold mine, and eventually he found it. Or at least that's what he said in the last letter he wrote back home. But we'll never actually know for sure, because after sending that letter on that same day, Lafayette's cabin burned down and he died without telling anybody the location of the mine. And so with French's death, that sort of solidified
real
the
photo of
rumor
his
the
cabin.
haunting
It's a real one.
and people began to believe that there was only one
Little
thing
pig
that
did
could
not build it out
explain
of brick.
this almost magnetic pull the gold had on so many people, and also all the terrible fates that befell everybody who tried to go look for it. And that was that the gold mine was cursed. And today, people still believe that Blackjack's ghost is out there in the forest preventing people from finding the gold. But whatever the truth is, whether the curse is real or not, to this day, no one has ever been able to successfully find the gold again and live to tell about it.
Hold on. Yeah. So, what's the moral of the story? Or do you go ahead with what you were gonna say first?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we need to GPS that place and go look for some gold, because I don't care about all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if we were gonna roll the dice,
Let's go get some gold.
we could go
man.
get some gold. We'll be all right. Like if we hear the voices, we just tell them that they don't exist. Monkeys shouldn't be out here in this forest,
Right?
and that we'll be okay.
I think it'd be a really good time.
But what's shocking to me is that nobody has found this mine at this point. Like, how could they not have found it? Like, if this place like really did exist, how has it not been found yet?
Because everybody just dies on the way there, or
Yeah, you would think somebody would have found it.
nobody knows where it is now.
You know what I do know where one thing is. It's that subscribe button that's right over there somewhere. We're down here somewhere. Hit that button. Drop a comment. Hit the like button while you're at it too. And that notification bell to be notified each and every time we go live, because we're going to be going live a lot in 2025. As I've said that many times.
Live in 2025.
Yes. And
Not alive. Live in 2025.
hopefully alive.
Also
in
alive
2025.
in
Yes.
2025.
Yes, and if we come up missing because we went to go look for the lemon mine, you guys can pay tribute to us by subscribing to the channel. Or else we're gonna come to your house and go,
It's on me. I'm not a monkey.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this
Oh, man.
foolishness. We appreciate you. If you made it this far, drop a
Kudos.
comment below and say you made it to the end.
Yep.
Please do that. And let us know if
We'll
you
give
would
you
go.
a shout out.
Let us know if you would go to the lemon mine if you could.
Who's
find
joining us?
It. Yes, at the mine.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see you soon. Peace out.